Welcome to Macro Matters, our bi-weekly conversation about the macro events that matter for our members in the finance industry. Today is March 2nd, 2022. My name is Lotta Moberg. I'm with the Dynamic Allocation Strategies team at William Blair here in Chicago. And joining me, as previously, are Rich Excell and Tony Zhang. They're both of the Geese College of Business at University of Illinois. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Lotta, how you doing today?
Hey, Lotta. Hi, Rich.
Hey, Tony.
Now, on a day like today, what else might we want to talk about than the conflict in Russia? And we thought about how we could contribute to this conversation, not trying to cover the specific military developments that a lot of people would have heard about, some of the political things. There's so many things we're all reading about this. And what we want to get into today, after we get a little bit of an overview, is to understand the role of cryptocurrency and possibly other blockchain solutions. And we're really taking advantage of having Tony Zhang here with us because he is really the person who is well versed in this. So to start off with, and before we start picking his brain here, just for context, maybe just for historical record, again, March 2nd, 2022, this is in the middle of the what looks like a Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have seen Russia infringing on Ukrainian territory to a much larger extent than a lot of people had expected. Now, what looked for a good while as a negotiating ploy from Putin turns out to be what seems to be much more with a very different agenda. And I am definitely surprised. I talked on this channel about how I don't think that Putin is going to go as far as he has so far. So I'm probably not the only one surprised out there. I certainly am. I've had to revise my theories about what's going to happen going forward. There's a lot of theories floating out there, and therefore we want to put a little bit of our different angle out there. Now, a very important part of what's going to matter for our listeners here in the finance industry is the implications of the sanctions. And a couple of sanctions that have been talked about a lot, right, is the sanction on the central bank, preventing the central bank from accessing its reserves that is actually held to a large extent in other countries, so outside of Russia. And then you also have the SWIFT exclusion from the SWIFT cooperation of Russian banks. Not all Russian banks, probably not the big one, Sberbank, from what I've understood so far. The SWIFT is a messaging system. It's not a transfer system. You can still transfer, but it becomes more cumbersome and presumably more costly for banks to do so. So with that very broad overview, I could say a lot of other things, of course, so could we all, but I'll turn it over first to Rich to give a little bit color. I know that you've looked into specifically more of the implications of the SWIFT and I think the other banking related sanctions here. What are the main issues here for Russia? Things might seem really scary when they're not. Some other things, problems may be lurking for Russia that we might not all be thinking about. So maybe you could give us a little bit more color on that, Rich.
Sure. So I guess what I would say is it's not just some problems potentially for Russia, even though the sanctions are aimed at Russia. It's what are the problems for other participants, other market participants, et cetera, because remember, as a major exporter, Russia provided a lot of liquidity back into the system, and therefore that liquidity is going to vanquish. And we've seen in other crises, the biggest one being the Lehman crisis around the great financial crisis. When that liquidity comes out of the system, if the central banks aren't there to step in and provide that, we can see the economy seize up. Now, I think we've learned some lessons from Lehman, et cetera, and the central banks are somewhat prepared. But I think what I would suggest is, and we've kind of talked about before, is like, while maybe some companies, some banks, some individuals still maybe have access to the SWIFT messaging and SWIFT transactions, the fact that sanctions have been ratcheted up now a second time by the EU and then the US following, and frankly, surprisingly followed by a number of countries that normally stay neutral, not the least of which would be Switzerland and Singapore, that typically do not join these types of events because of their neutrality. The fact that they've gotten engaged really speaks to the severity of this. And I think from when I look at it, there are not only are there the banks and central bank, as you mentioned, that are involved that cannot access and cannot therefore transact any business or help transact business globally, but just the fact that there's the threat of this means that anyone who's doing business with Russia using the SWIFT messaging, using the traditional dollar-based or euro-based or reserves-based banking system is going to be very hesitant, if not avoided at all costs. And therefore, Russia and the products from Russia will have to kind of go through the black market. But I think that to me, the two big questions to come out are, what are the implications of the removal of this 600 billion, for instance, of FX reserves that Russia had, half of which was maybe in gold, the rest of which was in FX swaps, not the dollar per se. Russia, since 2014, Russia has not held treasuries or held US dollars. Really, they preferred to hold euros on anything because that's their biggest customer. But the removal of that liquidity, what are the implications there? What are the stresses on short-term funding markets? What does the Fed have to do in terms of dollar swap lines to other central banks to make sure that the system continues to function? That's one question that I have. But to me, the bigger question, and the one that's more relevant, is to what extent can the crypto markets play a part in this? To what extent will they allow Russia to circumnavigate this kind of traditional dollar and euro-based system? Is there the liquidity? Is there the ability for companies to transact via crypto to move these billions of dollars of products around the world? And that's a question. If I have any questions like that, I always have to go to Tony and ask him, because he is the expert and he's the one that can answer that. And then the other question I would ask you, Tony, not only to what extent can that happen, but to what extent does that invite regulation from those countries that actually wanted to impose these restrictions in the first place?
Yes, Rich and Lotta, as we all know that even before we talk about that, we feel very, very surprised that Russia really actually take very actions and into the Ukraine. Apparently, the whole financial system and economic system took the shot, which have been seen like from the financial market over the reaction overnight last week. This is no doubt one of the shocking events that has not been predicted by the I think the financial system at all. But let's come back to the point is like apparently we have seen that Europe, EU, and other countries join together with the US take swift actions to sanction I think the Russian central bank, trying to squeeze the economic impact for the Russian government, so that actually might have another impact to maybe trying to prevent the war from continuing. I think this is the hope. Now, apparently, just over the past few days, like one of the biggest challenges right now here is that whether the Russian government can actually utilize the crypto to circumvent this sanction, right? This is the biggest questions. Now, to really get down to the answer for that, I think this has a lot of debates. If we think about the characteristic of the crypto from the beginning, actually it has three major properties. One is being anonymous, which means basically like no one knows like who actually owns that crypto account. The second one will be being like encrypted, like which means it's become extremely difficult to bypass or maybe trying to steal the account information from the system to become very secure for transaction. This will be the second one. The third one will be like this will become decentralized, right? Decentralized means there's actually no one has the power to really control the movement of the capital flow, the crypto flow from one place to another, right? Now, apparently, the central bank and the government's actually trying to step up and say, hey, we should actually take the process or procedure, trying to prevent that Russia may try to bypass the sanctions through the blockchain network. Now, this actually would really try to hit onto that three question, the three basic property of crypto, which actually built on blockchain technology, right? Number one is anonymous. Like apparently, if we actually ask right now, what the government actually asks is the exchange, the major exchange for crypto in the world to basically to block all of the users coming out from Russia, right? This is actually one of the major questions. Like apparently in the past, some of the major exchange, which has been highly regulated, they might require the KYC, like key user information, so that we know they know the user's information or account information, like on the back end, from where and controlled by whom. But whether that kind of information will be actually passed over to the government under some legal requirement, that's right now a biggest question mark. If they do, so this actually might be against whatever the initial belief that the creation of the blockchain technology and same as the crypto economic is to actually try to circumvent the global financial system, which should not be regulated by any government. So that's one of the major beliefs, being anonymous, right? Now, can they do that? Or whether all of the exchange would do that? Apparently, we do know that some exchange, which they want to be regulated, actually might comply with this request. But there are also some of exchange, including like Binance, who actually decline such kind of request to hand over or maybe just to block the user all from the Russia, right? This is something that we know this is the underlying principle adopted by the blockchain. One of the major reasons that crypto market or blockchain technology has grown so quick and dramatically over the past decade is built on that principle as well. They don't want any regulation from the central bank or governments. They wanted this system to be decentralized, which means they want to see the democracy from all of the user rather than by the governments. So this two major principles underlying the crypto system actually right now are facing the challenge. If all of the major exchange really comply with the request, will all of them comply? So far, I think it's still unknown at this moment. But that's actually the two big things. If they do that, I think whether people will really think about should they actually adopt the crypto system or blockchain technology going forward, that will become something that I think that assumption will be much, much weakened going forward. So that's going to hurt crypto ecosystem as well. Now let's look at the other part, right? Now, if they really think about taking the sweep action, just trying to block the Russian government or to utilize all the financial capability, including the crypto and global financial system. Now, this immediately will come to another major question: is will other countries try to take preventive actions upon seeing what Russia has been sanctioned at this time? That means, will they actually prepare to be sanctioned to utilize other financial system as a backup, just in case in the future, if someone outside of their own territory utilize maybe this kind as a weapon to fight against them? This is a big question mark.
So Tony, now, before you even go there, can we just back off and understand how this could even work? So if you're talking about the Russian government or central bank using a crypto exchange to obtain funds that they would have abroad, right? So the question is, fine, you have the receiver of these funds, you have an exchange, assuming the exchange plays along here. who is on the other end? Who will be stepping in here to supply funds to Russia? Is it, if it's say China, well, they can already do it. They have already a mechanism to transfer money, right? So what scenario are we looking at here when this actually works?
Apparently in this at this moment right now is whether they can actually transfer the capital freely across the borders. It's mainly for the transaction. Apparently, this is one of the major uses. What people have discussed, I have no further confirmation at this point, is the oligarchs, which actually control the major wealth in Russia. They want to be able to free from the sanction as well, so that their accounts will not be frozen. If they have the wealth stored on crypto, like mainly in Bitcoin or Ethereum, now at this moment, if they don't move the Bitcoin or Ethereum, as long as they don't move, like no one actually know that where the account actually belong to. I mean, on crypto system, it's the address. It's mainly the address information to represent where the Bitcoin or crypto are stored. As long as they store the wealth, no one actually will be able to freeze their account based on this decentralized system. This is something that we can think about. On the other part, apparently they can, because of the liquidity of the crypto market in major exchange, it's very, very liquid. And you can actually exchange your Bitcoin or crypto into a major currency on the blockchain network very easily. If you look at the Bitcoin or Ethereum, very, very liquid. So on the counterparts, you just maybe can be anybody who actually own the Ethereum or Bitcoin, who also want to actually store their value on Bitcoin. So this is a lot of liquidity on the other side, which you don't know.
It can be anyone that has $100 million on the other side, right? So I mean, it's going to be done in larger transactions that would be noticeable, if not traceable, right?
Yeah. I think the thing is, we have now, like, I have three different recipients in my mind, right? So one is what Tony started talking about, which is the government and the central bank and like really big institutions, in which case there's a lot of money here. So it's not going to be anyone who has 100,000 in an account, right? So there we have it. We've got to figure out who would be a different counterpart. And it seems like it's really hard to come up with that story, right? The other one would be an oligarch. Oligarch also have a lot of money. So still you need a big counterpart there if they're going to be the recipients, but still that could work. Like, you know, as you say, there could be a lot of people with some money each. And I also want to, I want to also get into what may be the most plausible way in which crypto markets are going to benefit from the situation, which is the people on the ground who are now standing outside the ATMs and not being able to get their money out. Now there, we're talking smaller sums, we're talking people who may be able to meet their needs for funds and things like that. And there I am thinking also is where the president might come for an impetus of just more people generally on the general populace wanting to use crypto on a more sustainable basis.
And one thing I would suggest is, I understand the ethos of crypto is to not want to be regulated by any central authority. However, what I would suggest is that one of the other big positive bullish stories for crypto in the last year has been the institutional adoption of crypto in many places. Company after company has wanted to stop doing business with Russia because it was seen to be the right thing to do from a social standpoint, et cetera. And to the extent that these exchanges are not going to follow suit, that's completely their right to do so. But I think two things. One is it invites more scrutiny and more regulation from all the countries involved, the EU, the US, the EU, et cetera. But also then if you're an institutional investor into institutional platform, do you want to be seen to be doing business with these same sorts of exchanges? Because your shareholders, your investors, et cetera, may not want to have you be doing business with them. And so I think you might slow down the institutional adoption, and you certainly might invite more scrutiny from governments, and that even so, it seems to me to be understanding in the short term why they're doing it, but it seems to be a long-term probably a negative decision from a strategic standpoint.
I agree with Rich. Definitely the action or the discussion over whether the Bitcoin should be actually, the crypto market should be regulated right now become a major topic after the sanction this time. I think a lot of the central banks and the government actually right now would realize this might be very, very important to try to step in and see if there might be any loophole over the crypto market. And to a certain extent, some of the major crypto exchange might see more of legal actions going forward. This is something that, from my point of view, that's definitely going to happen, especially some of the major exchange outside of the U.S. I believe that they're going to see more of legal action taken from the U.S. and then EU as well over the next few months, or even over the next few weeks. Very, very important.
What are your thoughts on about the adoption among the general populace in the faces of what could be, their kind of currency crisis that we're witnessing right now?
Yeah, apparently one of the major factors behind the asset pricing model of the crypto is the adoption of the mass population. People cannot actually use the DCF model to price any crypto at this moment, right? Because crypto has no cash flow or going forward. Now, the only major thing is, will actually the crypto has the terminal value? This is something that we don't know, but people would think that it might have the terminal value due to the belief that the crypto might have stored the valuation, or to a certain extent. Now, the more people actually believe in this kind of a theory, actually might adopt the crypto faster than ever. Now, under this scenario, with more of scrutiny like coming over from the regulator, from the central banks, and like regulated agency, apparently, I think the user, especially the institutional users, might actually slow down and take a step and see actually what might happen. Will there be a clear path for the regulation coming forward? Actually, sometimes it could be twofold. Maybe over the next few weeks or next few months, we might see a slow step from the institutional adoption. But once actually we see a clear path, most of the time, that it's gonna help the institution to get into this kind of main asset classes rather than slow down. So it actually has a double-sided effect. It might slow down initially, then actually facilitate the adoption within the institution once we are very, very clear, or we are very, very sure about how the regulation would look like. Now, over the past few years, the Congress in the US apparently really slowed down to take any regulatory actions or taking some thinking process or procedure on hold to regulate the market, because they say they are afraid if they take the step too soon, which actually might hurt or kill the innovation instantaneously. So for something that both unknown to the financial system and to academia, to central bank as well, they want to take wait and look approach of the past few years. Now at this moment, are they going to still take the same approach or mechanism as they did before? I highly doubt it. I think at this moment, they might really start to think, well, maybe SEC or FDIC should step in and see if they should take the major crypto exchange under the regulatory umbrella, or would there be actually offer any guidance or clear guidance for how SEC should regulate the crypto market over the next few weeks or few months?
So the sequence of events that we're looking at here is that this is kind of a wake-up call for regulators. They're realizing there's an avenue through which crypto exchanges may be used that they are not really happy with. They impose regulations. Institutional investors know that regulations are coming along, and therefore there's an uncertainty out there. They're pulling back. Once regulations is in place, that is after the fact, which creates certainty for the institutional investors, right? So that's a really good aspect of it that I've not thought of. Maybe we can bring it back before we wrap this up. Really, can we try to figure out like the impact here of the sanctions for Russia, right? What is the most plausible way through which any kind of blockchain thing, presumably crypto exchange, maybe something else, going to alleviate the impact of the sanctions on the Russian government plus central bank here, the Russian establishment?
Well, that's actually a good question, Lotta. If we remember what happened I think in year 2014, what happened after the scenario, the crisis in Crimea over there, some of the major banks has been removed from the SWIFT financial systems in Russia. Upon that, they realized being actually removed from the SWIFT system could be one of the major actions within the sanctions against Russia. Russian government knows about that. Russian central bank knows about that. Since that, they have taken the action to conduct what they call the digital currency system, quite like the digital currency system proposed by Chinese central bank as well. Well, sometimes the major issue for this kind of digital currency system or mechanism infrastructure is the adoption, which means did you have the counterparts on the other end? Like SWIFT system, which have been apparently the largest financial systems underlying the global transaction, is mainly because there are a lot of central banks and major banks globally are utilizing this system, utilizing the SWIFT, right? But if only one central bank issue the digital currency system and no one else actually is using that, that will become useless. Now, for the digital currency system to actually work, especially right now for the one that proposed by the Russian central bank, they kick off the initiation of the digital currency systems, I think in early February, trying to test whether that's going to work. Now, to get that work, you need a counterpart. Apparently, one of the major users, I mean, from the global financial systems, I believe will be the Chinese central bank or Chinese government, right? Whether they're going to receive the support from the Chinese government at this moment will become very, very critical for them to alleviate the impact from the sanction over the Russian economy. And the attitude from the Chinese government at this moment is unclear. That's why the international governments are trying to push the Chinese government to express clearly whether they actually support the Russian government or Russian central bank at this moment. Well, this need to be answered. So far, we haven't really seen any major either disclosure or any attitude being taught by the Chinese government or Chinese central bank at this moment, which is unknown.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So,
well, I mean, it's interesting because China is one of the biggest customers of Russian energy and Russian food, right? So, to your point, it's the obvious place for it's the obvious place for Russia to turn because that's where a lot of the business is being conducted already. It's an obvious place to try to find kind of an off-ramp, if you will, to this situation. and they're certainly not making China's life any easier by inviting all the scrutiny at a time when China has a lot of its own domestic issues to worry about.
Correct. And Chinese government and Chinese central bank actually don't want to get involved into this kind of a very bizarre situation or very embarrassing situation. On one way or on the other way, they're going to lose one of the major trade partners either way, right? So it's very, very tough. Or just I don't think this we're going to see a clear answer very shortly. But yeah, I think it's going to take wait and see approach as well. Apparently, 4 major commercial banks in China has removed mainly all of their counterparts in Russia from the SWIFT system as well. They actually block the transaction as well from the 4 major commercial banks. But for the remaining other financial institutions, unknown as still. Definitely, this is going to have a huge impact to the energy market, which has become a centerpiece of the movement of financial market recently over the past 2 to 3 weeks. We have continued to see the surge of or the hike of energy price or oil price.
Yeah, so hopefully this has given our listeners a little bit of a different perspective of what to look out for, both in the crypto world specifically, as well as the actual impact here on the sanctions. Anything that any of you want to add really quickly before we wrap up here? Closing thoughts.
I think my only closing thought I would say is that I think while we have a near-term reprieve here, where you like you said, here we are on March 2nd, the markets are rallying, crypto markets are rallying, et cetera. I would just caution that there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty that's in front of us from an investment standpoint, and markets historically don't like uncertainty. So I think that we're far from out of the woods at this point.
Yeah, my final remark will be that even though I'm actually very eager to see how the crypto system or crypto market will react to the sanctions request at this moment, but I still feel that it's actually very sad to see what had happened in Ukraine. And literally, I really hope that this war can stop as soon as possible.
We sure all do. Yeah, so another aspect of uncertainty then that people might not think about, the regulatory side here of crypto exchanges going to matter a lot for institutional involvement, for crypto prices. So looking out for that. With that, thank you so much, guys, for joining me today.